Welcome to the Nudai Education Podcast. I'm your host, Shalimar K. Ali L. I want to begin by giving you a brief introduction to help you understand what the Nudai Education Podcast is about and who it is for. Then I'll briefly share a little bit about myself before we dive into the topics for today's show. So, what's the Nudai Education Podcast all about? The Nudai Education Podcast was created to talk about all things related to educating the melanated child, specifically those children who are identified as Black, African American, or members of the African Diaspora. This is my passion, and I make no apologies for it. I have been accused of being racist or prejudiced, and to that I say, no, I am not racist. I do not show prejudice, discrimination, or antagonize any person or group on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group. However, I do specifically show concern about the well-being of the children who identify as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora for specific reasons. As an educator of 30 years, I have firsthand knowledge of the injustices that these specific children have been privy to in the education system based on the color of their skin and the misconceptions that have been developed about these children concerning their character. As a result, I am an advocate for equity in education, and I am proud to be on the front line to lead the way to advocate for change for our children, our babies who are identified as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora. In today's podcast, we are going to discuss the state of education regarding the children of the African diaspora, why we must go back to educating our own children. How does homeschooling fit into the equation of securing better educational opportunities for the children that classify as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora? How to address the challenges homeschooling may present, and we will end with debunking myths related to homeschooling. This is my disclaimer. The topics I discuss on this podcast evolve from my own experiences, thoughts, and research. These topics authentically evolve from me, and I am not expressing the ideas, thoughts, or ideology expressed by other persons or groups. Warning: these things that I discuss on this podcast may trigger some people. If you are triggered by the topic or topics being discussed, you have the option to detach from the podcast and find something better to listen to that suits your fancy. I am well aware that the messages I share are not going to sit well with some, but for others, it will bring you comfort to know that you are not alone in this battle, and the injustices you and your children have experienced by the education system are not a figment of your imagination. In this podcast, I will not sugarcoat or gloss over anything. I will, however, provide you with case studies, facts, and options to reposition yourself and your melanated children to secure the educational opportunities that they need and deserve. If you are in the group of those who resonate with this message and want to join the movement to secure better education for the children they classify as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora, please hit the like button and show the channel some love and subscribe to the channel so you can be in the know for sure when we drop a new podcast episode. So, before we jump into the topics for today's podcast, Let me share a little bit about who I am and why I'm so passionate about securing better educational opportunities for children that classify as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora. As I stated in the beginning of the podcast, I am Shalimar Ali L. I am a single mother of Native American descent who went from being overworked, unfulfilled, and forced to teach in unrealistic classroom settings with political agendas in the public and private schools, to being fulfilled and overjoyed as the founder of an educational company that makes students and their families the focus, while transforming the lives of those students and making a difference in their lives as well as the lives of their family members. With 30 years of dedicated service in education, I've empowered students to recognize their strengths, conquer their fears, overcome obstacles, and excel in both academics and life. As the executive director of Nudai Education, I am passionate about fostering academic excellence through innovative instructional design. I am the creator of the CPR perspective, 3 steps to resuscitating academic achievers. What is the CPR perspective, you might ask? The CPR perspective is a 3 step approach that leverages culturally relevant instructional design with technology and visual and performing arts to inspire students' success. Now that I've shared a little bit about myself, let's dive into today's topics. We'll begin with discussing the state of education regarding the children of the African diaspora. The United Negro Fund released an article titled K-12 Disparity Facts and Statistics. I'm going to share 3 of the alarming statistics listed in this article with you, and I will attach the article in the description for you to read the article in its entirety at your leisure. Statistic number 1. According to the United Negro Fund, African American students are less likely than white students to have access to college-ready courses. In fact, in 2011-12, only 57% of Black students have access to a full range of math and science courses necessary for college readiness, compared to 81% of Asian American students and 71% of white students. Statistic number 2, shared by the United Negro College Fund. African American students are less likely to be college ready. In fact, 61% of ACT tested Black students in the 2015 high school graduating class met none of the 4 ACT college readiness benchmarks, nearly twice the 31% rate for all students. Statistic number 3, shared by the United Negro College Fund. Black students spend less time in the classroom due to discipline, which further hinders their access to quality education. Black students are nearly 2 times as likely to be suspended without educational services as white students. Black students are also 3.8 times as likely to receive 1 or more out-of-school suspensions as white students. In addition, Black children represent 19% of the nation's preschool population, yet 47% of those receive more than 1 out-of-school suspension, in comparison to white students who represent 41% of preschool enrollment, but only 28% of those students receive more than 1 out-of-school suspension. Even more troubling, Black students are 2.3 times as likely to receive a referral to law enforcement or be subject to a school-related arrest as white students. Now, the statistics that I shared with you are not listed in the original article in the order in which I shared them. There are 9 statistics listed in the article. I am focusing on 3 of the 9. If you want to read the original article, feel free to click on the link in the description. Now, back to the topic, the state of education regarding the children of the African diaspora. From the three alarming statistics I have shared, it's safe to say the education system is failing the children who are classified as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora in a royal way. For years, there has been much discussion about the school to the prison pipeline agenda that is prevalent in the school system. I could talk about that topic alone for hours, but for the sake of time, we will discuss that topic in another podcast show. Let's look at the ugly truth about the education system. The education system was created for the so-called elite class identified by the system as white people to give them a proper education so they can maintain their status as the elite class and propagate the social construct of superiority as the dominant race in America. Whereas the agenda of the education system in relation to the children classified as Black, African American, or members of the African diaspora, it was and still is to indoctrinate these children with the ideology that supports the social construct that white people are the superior race in America. To support my stance that the education system is failing children classified as Black, African American, or members of the African diaspora in a royal way, in which I stand 10 toes down on will not budge, I'll share two personal experiences with you. As the in-school suspension teacher at a prominent high school in Missouri, I took the initiative to ensure that students who were sent to in-school were not just sitting in a seat, sleeping, talking, or wasting time, but that they were actively working on improving their academic fortitude while in school. The first day on the job, I was very irritated as I watched students come in the room and put their heads down to take a nap. I asked, "Do you have work to do or work to work on?" Many said no. Others responded with, "Yes, but I don't know how to do it." Those who had work and didn't know how to do it, I worked one-on-one with them to help them understand what they were doing and show them how to complete the assignments with ease. These students were very grateful. For those who didn't have anything to do, for the sake of maintaining the peace and integrity in the in-school classroom, I let them sleep for the first day, but made it my business to make sure that would never be a problem again. Moving forward, I will come in early to pull up the schedules of the students assigned to in-school and go to their teachers to get the assignments before school started. If I couldn't make it to their teacher's classroom, I would email the teacher and ask if they could have someone bring the students' assignments to the in-school room so they can complete their work. My direct supervisor, who was an assistant principal, was excited that the students were learning and not being idle. She actually started pulling students out of class to send them to me to tutor them in algebra and geometry. The head principal, however, was not happy about what was going on. The sad thing was, all three of us, the head principal, the assistant principal, and myself, were all melanated. So you would think we would all be on the same page as far as making sure the melanated students receive the best education possible, but that wasn't so. The sad thing was, all three of us, the head principal, the assistant principal, and myself, were all melanated. So you would think we would all be on the same page as far as making sure the melanated students receive the best education possible, but that wasn't so. One day I was called into the head principal's office. She commenced to tell me that she was unhappy. The students wanted to come to in school instead of going to class because they said they learned more in school than they did in class. She also told me that she was unhappy about my posters and that I would have to get my posters approved by her before posting them. Mind you, these are posters that said things like, "Your attitude determines your altitude." Posters that showcase the achievements of melanated people. Posters that encourage students to embrace their flaws and use their skills to overcome their flaws and turn their weaknesses into strengths. I was baffled. And to add insult to injury, the principal, the head principal, transferred me to an elementary school because she said I was teaching the students too much. Imagine that. How can you teach a student too much when they come to school to learn? The second situation I experienced happened when I started Nudai Education Homeschool Co-op. I had a student who came to my homeschool who was in the fourth grade, but actually had the academic acumen of a kindergarten. His mom said the school system told her he was not teachable. When I met him the first day, he introduced himself and then sat down at the table and started chanting, "I'm retarded, I'm retarded, I'm retarded." No, 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 no. I stopped him and said, "You are not retarded, and don't ever let anyone tell you that you are retarded. If someone tells you that you are retarded, tell them, 'No, I'm intelligent.' Smile and move along." I began detoxing his negative beliefs about himself by having him self correct his words. When he would say negative things about himself, I would stop him and have him replace that negative thought with a positive thought. Eventually, he was able to move past the negativity to see the light he possessed. One day, his mother called me and she was crying. She said, "We're in the store, and my son is reading the signs in the store. He has also been telling people that he doesn't need a calculator because he is the calculator. And the school system told me that he would never be able to do math without a calculator. I thank you so much for the work you are doing with him." In both situations, the systems that were put in place for the in-school students and the homeschool student had branded them with the idea that they weren't worthy of being properly educated. However, me being able to assess the situation to understand the needs of my students and put a new narrative in place to replace the old narrative of negativity, my students were able to excel and exceed the expectations of the system. This leads to the next topic: why we as melanated elders must go back to educating our own children. The question on the floor is, why must we go back to educating our own children? First of all, as true elders of the community, we have a vested interest in the outcome of our up and coming youth. Therefore, we're going to make decisions and choices that are in their best interest, not decisions and choices that are in the best interest of someone else or something for that matter. Secondly, culture plays a big role when it comes to educating our youth. According to an article published by USA Facts in 2023, which I will link in the description for you, there were approximately 7.2 million Black students in the U.S. public schools during the 2020-2021 school year. The student population in the public school sector was 15% Black, 46% white, 28% Hispanic, 5% Asian, 4% multiracial, and 1% American Indian or Alaska Native. With that said, 79.9% of public school teachers were white, 9.4% were Hispanic, 6.1% were Black, 2.4% were Asian, and 1.6 were multiracial. Less than 0.5% were American Indian, Alaska Native, or Pacific Islander. Some ask, why does the race of the teacher matter? It's all about the culture. An article written by Credits for Teachers in 2022 stated, it is impossible to escape the connection between culture and learning, which seem to be a key area of focus for educators and a hot topic in the education right now. It goes on to say, the fact of the matter is that in order to best serve their students, teachers must consider how culture affects learning. From my personal experience as an educator, what I have seen is a cultural mismatch between the student population and the teaching population. It's no secret that in American society, mostly what is shared about young people from the African diaspora are negative images, ideas, ideologies, stereotypes, and the list goes on. Look at the news. Mostly what you will see and hear regarding the melanated race is negative. Occasionally, they will share some good news about one or maybe a few melanated scholars, but that is rare, and they usually pick the scholars to showcase that are status quo who mirror the image of the so-called elite class. As an algebra teacher in a predominantly melanated middle school, I was told by our lead math teacher that I was teaching my students too much. In her words, she said, you're actually teaching them algebra when you should be focusing on teaching them multiplication and division. I looked her in the eye and said, these are middle school scholars, not elementary school scholars. I hold my scholars to high standards. Multiplication and division lessons are for elementary school scholars. In middle school, multiplication and division is a warm-up that takes us into our lesson. I will not participate in dumbing these scholars down. That is not what I'm here for. I had a reputation at this middle school for speaking up and advocating for my students. Not just for my personal students, but for the student population. For instance, our very first staff meeting of the school year, the principal, who was a melanated male, came in the meeting and said, this year, these are the 20% that we're going to focus on because these are the students that are going to get us the points for the test. So me, being who I am, I raised my hand and said, in so many words, how, Sway? Sir, so you're saying we're going to focus on 20% of the student base, which means that we're leaving 80% behind. That means that 80% that you're not giving a chance, that you're not choosing to teach, that you're leaving behind, those are going to be the same children who are going to break in your house, steal your car, beat your wife up and take her purse because you didn't give them options. He looked at me and said, Miss Ali, yeah, we know you're going to teach your students. Do what you do. I said, yeah, because if I can't teach my students, you can fire me. That was always my stance. If I cannot properly educate my students the way that they need to be educated in order for them to excel, let me go because I don't belong here. That is not what I'm here for. I'm not here for undereducated. I'm not here for dumbing down. I'm not here for teaching them to not learn. I'm here to help them excel. And if I can't do that, there's no need for me to be here. Let me get off my soapbox and return back to what we were actually talking about because I could talk about that all day. But back to what we were talking about. Growing up, most of my teachers were melanated. I did have a handful of white teachers that I made connections with, but the connection I had with them was different than the connection I had with my melanated teachers. The white teachers I connected with often pitied me as a melanated child and often showcased my gifts as a way to say I was in alignment with the agenda at hand. My melanated teachers, on the other hand, were stern, didn't play, didn't let me get away with anything, told me hard truths, were relatable, and not only connected with me, but also with my family. We were a community, and this community provided a support system for me to grow and excel academically as well as personally. One teacher I had, named Sandy Austin, was my saving grace. She was a long-term substitute for my kindergarten class. When I was in kindergarten, I was very busy and very inquisitive. I had no interest in what was being taught because I had already been taught that material at home before I entered kindergarten. My white teachers labeled me as a problem, whereas Miss Austin overstood me and knew why I was not interested in what was being taught. My mother figure was told that I had a learning disability and a behavior problem. Therefore, I was going to be put in special education classes. Uh-uh. Miss Austin wasn't having it. She told my mother figure, and I quote, "Girl, don't let them put your daughter in special education. Ain't nothing wrong with her. She is super smart, and she just needs her ass beat. Make them test her. If she tests out, they will have to figure out how to deal with her." My mother figure took her advice, and I tested out. So I was able to escape the special needs diagnosis that was not warranted in the first place. Unfortunately, that is not the case for many students from the African diaspora. An article published by Education Next, Volume 21, Number 2, pointed out that fewer Black and Hispanic students receive special education services in kindergarten, but by fourth grade, the number of white and Black students receiving special education services is equal. I can write a book about this. One day I just might. But for now, to help you better understand why this is true, you can read the book Dumbing Us Down: The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling by John Taylor Gatto, a member of the so-called elite class. This book can also be purchased on Audible for you to listen to at your leisure. Now that we've gotten the preliminaries out of the way, let's talk about how does homeschooling fit into the equation of securing better educational opportunities for the children that classify as Black, African American, or are members of the African diaspora. Homeschool provides a canvas for parents and students to create their own educational program that meets the needs of the scholar being homeschooled. Homeschooling is a way to regain your power as a parent in matters of education that pertain to your child or children. You don't have to be a teacher or a master of all the subjects. You simply have to want to give your child an opportunity to have an educational experience that meets their needs and helps them be the best version of themselves. Many parents from the African diaspora are waking up to this knowledge and deciding to pull their scholars out of the education system. In 2020, the number of scholars in the African diaspora being homeschooled increased from 3.3% to 16.1%, according to a Forbes article titled, "Why More Black Families Are Choosing to Homeschool Their Children." There are many more parents in the African diaspora who would love to have the opportunity to homeschool their children, but they don't know where to start, or they are concerned about not having the sufficient knowledge to make sure their scholars attain the academic fortitude they need to be competitive in the world and or become financially stable. Then there are those who want to homeschool their scholars but receive so much pushback from relatives and friends based on misconceptions and myths about homeschooling, making them skeptical about taking this leap of faith. So, to assist you on your decision to remove your scholar from the education system and take control of your scholar's educational journey, I will share how to address challenges that homeschooling may present. One of the biggest challenges I hear parents who want to homeschool talk about is scheduling and balancing work with a homeschooling schedule. So let's talk about it. Homeschool scheduling allows you the freedom to create your own schedule. You don't have to have a school day that mirrors the education system. Homeschooling is not schooling at home. It is an opportunity for young people to discover their strengths, weaknesses, and talents to unlock the unlimited possibilities available to them. The way you go about this is your own personal style. You don't have to adapt to that which you see in the public or private education system. If you work a job that is not home based, you have options. You can put your child in a homeschool co op or enroll them in a homeschool academy. Now, I will warn you that just like with putting your child in a school, you need to be very selective who you allow to oversee your child when you are not present, because everyone does not have pure intentions. So be very diligent when selecting a homeschool co-op or a homeschool academy for your child. Okay? Another option you may have is to enroll your student or scholar in a homeschool academy that is online based. With online homeschooling, if your child is of age, they may be able to complete their work without you being present. Or you can hire someone to stay with them and ensure they do their work and or activities and have the support they need. You also have the option to put your scholar in a homeschool visual and performing arts program and or sports program that meets during the day and then teach them the core subjects in the evening when you are at home together. There's also an option for you to hire a tutor or put them in a tutoring program for subjects that you are not well versed in. Whichever route you choose, there is an abundance of options out there. You just have to do your research to see what meets your family's homeschool needs. Now that we've discussed some of our viable options, let's move on to debunking homeschool misconceptions and myths. One of the biggest misconceptions or myths about homeschooling is that children are isolated from their peers and they will miss out on socialization. This is a myth that is a hot topic for me. I could talk about this for hours, but for the sake of time, I will say this. We have to release the BS programming and realize that children don't go to school to socialize. They go to school to learn and develop their character. At least that's what the focus should be. Socialization is for after school hours and can be capitalized on via after school or weekend activities or programs. As a homeschool mom, I can testify that my scholars had more socialization than many of their peers who attended school. They participated in dance, community organizations, community service projects, spiritual organizations, and more. They were not and still are not socially deprived. The same can be true for your scholar or scholars. There are an enormous amount of programs that allow your scholar or scholars to socialize at the appropriate time. Heck, you can create programs of your own and invite other parents to bring their scholars to participate. Homeschooling allows for flexibility, creativity, and adaptability. Create your own flow and do what works best for you and yours. Another myth or misconception that is associated with homeschool is that homeschool students don't receive the quality education that their peers who attend school receive. The question you should ask someone if they come to you with this myth or misconception is this: how do you define quality? Just a little FYI. Here are a few statistics to give your skeptics that will debunk this myth or misconception. First, statistics show that 78% of peer-reviewed studies on academic achievement show homeschool students perform statistically significantly better than those in institutional schools. Secondly, statistics show that homeschool students' scores are above average on achievement tests, regardless of their parents' level of formal education or their family household income. This is according to the National Home Education Research Institute. The final homeschool myth or misconception I would like to address is the idea that people think that homeschooling is only for white people. This right here, who in the world made a decision that free choice in education for our young scholars is only an opportunity afforded to white people? According to the Declaration of Independence, we are all created equal, right? Although when it was written, they were not speaking of people who are part of the African diaspora. However, over the years, we have come to understand that our birthright secures the same rights and freedoms, sometimes even more, than the white man secured for himself. Let's wake up and walk in our power. We have a birthright and we are free to write our own story and stop going along with his story. With that, I'm going to sign off. The choice of who educates your scholar or scholars is you and your scholar's choice. Make the choice to do what you know and feel is in their best interest. But before I go, if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Show the channel some love. We'll be back next Thursday to discuss the psychological trauma children of the African diaspora have to succumb to when being educated in the education system. As I always say, if you want systematic children, put them in the system, and that is what you will get. However, if you want to cultivate your children to be thinkers, who are in control of their destiny, who can solve their own problems, overcome obstacles, who love themselves and live their best lives, make a choice to unplug them from the system. Let's do better, family. Our lives are in our hands. Peace, love, and light.